Hello everybody, welcome to the Expedition Table. I'm your host Joe, and I'm doing a tier list today. And not just any tier list, but a tier list about Fire Emblem, and not just a Fire Emblem tier list, but one about the tropes and archetypes found in the series. On this tier list, I have 6 tiers and 25 tropes. The top tier is injected in my veins. These are the tropes, the things about Fire Emblem I just love, and I don't mind getting them time and time again. Cool to see, or things I'm fine with, and I do enjoy. Neat, but not always great. These are the tropes that I like, but they have been done poorly more than once. Meh, or fine. Just like, yeah, it's part of the series, whether I like it or not. I'd rather not see it. These are things I generally don't like. I'd rather not have them, not a deal breaker. And never again. For those special things I wish they'd just stop doing. For the tropes, we have the Anna, a recurring character, the avatars, the blue hair lord, dead parents, the devil axe, the divine pulse, the dragon kingdom, the gimmick character, the human dragons, mind control, paralogs or guidance chapters, Pegasus Sisters, permadeath, plot-based promotion, problem dragon, PvP, recurring villains, S supports, the brigands, totally not children, and the trainee. Alright. So, Anna is a recurring character that's been almost every Fire Emblem game. I think she could be endearing. Other times she's kind of irritating. I'm kind of not a fan of how she just is as a character. I don't know. The money-grubbing comic relief character is a lot better when you don't play as her, but she's been more and more of an active character in later titles. And I don't know. I find the shtick, when you're seeing her all the time, is definitely less funny and more grating. But overall, it's not something I really mind too much. It is just a part of the series, and I'm not, like... I don't like it at times, but I'm fine with it when it's done. Usually. I'd rather not see avatars. I just don't like the, I don't like how it's done most of the time. I've never really found any of the avatar characters to be compelling protagonists. They're usually, like, pretty bad for their stories. Far too much attention's kind of put around them, and it really kind of hampers other characters, as they have to obsess over this one character in particular that's usually extremely bland. And while, despite having a terrible design, I do think Alear actually is my favorite avatar in terms of their presence in the game. And my least favorite avatar is Mark from Blazing Blade. Mark's not really a character, but only really exists so the characters could break the fourth wall and talk to the player like it's a preschool show. And, not a fan of that. Don't really like Robin, Corrin, Chris, or Byleth. I don't really have much of an opinion on Sheds because I haven't played Three Hopes. Not much of a Warriors guy. Not a fan of avatars. It is kind of underwhelming to keep seeing them pop up again. It had novelty at first, but now they don't even really let you customize them, so they're extra boring. Mechanically. Artistically. I'd rather not have an avatar again. The Blue Hair Lord. Yeah, I think it's one of this series' like defining characteristics. While I certainly don't mind them branching off, and I do prefer when they do. You know, Marth set the standard, and there's generally just a form of tradition to have a blue-haired lord every now and then. They're blue hairs because, to differentiate the player and enemy side, the players are usually blue and the enemies are red. So having a main character design have blue hair was kind of a holdover from the Famicom days, when you had to make sure things were nice and clear due to how simple the graphics were, and it just kind of stuck. Even when the Lord stopped having blue hair, or stopped always having it, you're going to see blue hair when you're on the player phase. At least, not all the time, but, you're going to see a lot of blue. Dead parents. I don't hate this trope. It's a common trope kind of everywhere. It's an easy, cheap source of drama, an excuse for the character to be out and about no matter their age. I think it's just kind of been defanged due to how common it is. When there's a parent character of the main character in one of these games, you just kind of know they're going to bite the dust. It's gotten to the point when a new character is announced that's a parent, like your parent particularly, if you're a parent of the Avatar or a Lord, like everyone just kind of knows they're going to die. And it's funny because it pretty much happens instantaneous in Engage. So like no one was really even fussed about it. Bring back the Devil Axe. The Devil Axe is a very fun and stupid weapon. It is a weapon that will randomly hurt the user instead of the enemy, despite being incredibly strong. It's a gambling man's weapon. It's the perfect encapsulation of the risk that came with Fire Emblem, and its disappearance is probably due to the next trope. Divine Pulse. Okay, I get it. It's a big quality of life thing. The ability to rewind turns is just a quality of life addition that so many people just like, and it just helps everyone access it better. It tends to be overtuned to the point where, especially in 3 houses and the higher difficulties, they kind of get carried away with designing cheap challenges around it. So I do think it can be a hazard to game design. And just don't put it in the plot. Don't add time manipulation if you're not prepared to deal with the ramifications of just... You're just wondering, why doesn't the character just manipulate time whenever something bad happens? Not really a fan of it. The rewind function is kind of nice. Like, even if I adjusted to not having it in earlier games, I'm glad that it's around in some form. Even if you can only use it once or twice, which is what I'd prefer. It just smooths things along. The Dragon Civilization. Honestly, my problem with this is that we always hear about the stories and the grand power of the dragon people and the great civilization they had. But to this day, we have never really seen how their civilizations really work. And we've never really seen the dragons who are in a situation where they're actively dominant. They're always like collapsing or on the verge of extinction, or their civilization is just far away or has been broken down long ago. So it's a trope I honestly would like. Like, I'd put it above Divine Pulse and the Dead Parent. Nah, actually lower than Dead Parents even. Put Anna down there. I just feel like Intelligent Systems and Fire Emblem as a whole have just not done a very good job at showing what the dragons have been capable of. And it honestly makes them just kind of look incompetent. Gimmick characters. Okay, so gimmick characters, particularly, like, they're not only in later Fire Emblem games, but they're very noticeable due to the sheer amount of support conversations there are. Gimmick characters are characters that's whole, like, shtick revolves around the one thing, like a common cartoon character. The pictured examples I have here are Gaius, the candy thief, and Constance, who is like a haughty-taughty noble, but she's really depressive whenever she's in sunlight. Like, a lot of Fire Emblem's worst characters are just these weird gimmick characters that don't feel like they really belong in their respective games. I could only see Bernadetta panic so many times out of social anxiety before just... Even, like, decent characters can get weighed down by their gimmicks being shoved in your face all the time. You know, for a recent example, Saline from Fire Emblem Engage. She has a lot of conversations about tea, and that does not help her case when you're reading through a bunch of her supports because you just so happen to use her, and she's talking about tea 6 times straight. It really doesn't help your character out much. Just because your character has a lot of dialogue doesn't make them good. I don't need to hear Effie talk about food. I don't need to hear Effie talk about her muscles every time. Human dragons are neat, but not always great. You know, to compound the whole dragon situation, a lot of dragons, pretty much every dragon, takes a human form and transform into dragons for an assortment of reasons. I think it's fine. It's become a very common anime trope and fantasy trope in general. And I think it can be neat. It's a little oversaturated, but it's fine. Mind control sucks. Like, in any fiction. And I'm not talking about, like, propaganda and someone being swayed to the wrong side. No, I'm talking about, you know, mind control magic and all of that to make a character do an evil character's bidding. Does anyone like this? Mind control is just a tedious and annoying trope whenever it appears in. And Fire Emblem's done it a lot. And it's not any better there. Paralogue, or the Gaiden chapter. Alright, introducing Thracia 776. When you complete a mission with a particular scenario done, if you meet the requirements, you can go into a side chapter in between this and your next chapter. This is probably one of the coolest things about Fire Emblem, is when you get a paralogue. And, I mean, not much to say. There's secret missions that you get for playing the game well, just stumbling upon them by filling a certain criteria. I do prefer if you didn't have to do paralogs to get a good ending, which is something Binding Blade did. But otherwise, it's a classic thing that they added. It's an iconic part of the series. I like Pegasus Sisters. They don't do it too much, so I guess it adds to their appeal. Yeah, just like a group of knights that are family. Yeah, I just like that. They usually have the triangle attack, which if you surround an enemy with them, they get an automatic critical hit. And, I don't know, it's just a charming trope. You usually can't go wrong with a trio like this. Even if the characters aren't always equal, but I don't know. It's just another classic thing for Fire Emblem. Speaking of classic, permadeath. Fire Emblem and permadeath was once an inseparable duo, and it fulfills a lot of the it establishes and allows for Fire Emblem to work in the way it does. The tragedy of losing a character and having to scramble to replace them adds risk, adds life to the game. And it makes everyone's playthrough different, assuming that you actually don't reset. It adds stakes, and it just gives everyone a story to tell. Doing an Iron Man challenge, or just playing the game as intended. Permadeath is something I'm glad to see in Fire Emblem. And I'm making my own tactical RPG, and I'm definitely designing around permadeath. If you're writing a story about war, I think it's it's something that makes everything hit a little harder. Plot-based promotion. Okay, this is definitely a bigger thing back in the 2000s, where a a character will, when a character gets to a high enough level, they can promote into a stronger class. But your main character couldn't choose when to promote, but they had to wait until a certain chapter. And this usually tends to hurt the lords more than help them. Characters like Roy or Eliwood or Hector in the modes where they are the main character, Erica and Ephraim, I don't know if I already mentioned them. They kind of suffer from having to wait until late in the game to actually become viable combat units. It only worked for Ike because he got in the mid game, not the late game. And I don't know, it's just silly. Like, I kind of get the point of, like, it's like the hero's journey. They go through challenges and they get rewarded for it. But as a game mechanic, it generally just throttles a character's usefulness. And a lot of those lords aren't necessarily good units even after their promotion. And that's, kind of... it didn't really work, and I can see why they stopped doing it. The problem dragon. The evil dark dragon. It was a very common trope. Well, not common. It doesn't happen too much. But it's one of those series iconic things that could, honestly, I'd be glad if I never saw it again. Having the villain be a big evil dragon, it's just kind of passe at this point, in my opinion. Like, they subverted it in Fire Emblem 6 with Idun by making her more sympathetic. And in Awakening and Spoiler, they connect it to the protagonist in some way. But I think at this point, I don't know, the Dark Dragon just isn't an interesting concept. Alright, so Fire Emblem PvP has historically been awful every time it appears in. And the only acceptable time, even if it's not necessarily fun, is in Fire Emblem Heroes, due to being a reason to play the game. But from Shadow Dragon to Fire Emblem 7 to Fates, I don't know. Especially live PvP, it's just not fun. I don't know, I've never really seen anyone that actively enjoys Fire Emblem PvP. Alright. The recurring villain. Right in between these two. I hate it a little less than Mind Control, but I hate it more than Game Characters. Alright, so we've just talked about how permadeath can add stakes to a story and make your characters feel more precious. What about those villains that you fight multiple times and just kind of teleport away and not die for some reason? Kind of takes the whole sting and realism away from it, don't you think? Characters like the Hounds and Engage, a lot of the antagonists and heroes, particularly like Levitain and Leg Yarn, get job out so many times in that story that it was impossible for me to take them seriously or even like them. It makes the heroes look incompetent for not putting them down. Like, yeah, a merciful man would spare you once, but if only a fool would spare you a second or third time, and it just bogs the whole thing down. I don't know. I don't think Fire Emblem really does recurring villains very well. Like, it has been done well, but usually only if you fight someone, like, twice. Like, General Desai and Fire Emblem Echoes leaving a body double in case you actually kill him. Like, that works, especially since he only does it once. But if you're asking me to take a character seriously after it beat their ass like 3 times, just let it go. I don't want to see Hubert teleport away from me 4 times. Okay. Honestly, while I don't really mess around with shipping too much, I do like S supports. It adds a little bit of personality to the game, choosing who the main character ends up with. I don't know. I feel like it can be a nice way to give the later chapters, just kind of the ending, just a bit more of an emotional attachment to the player. You know, gonna design all of these likable, attractive characters. Might as well let the player choose one that they like best. The Brigands. Usually when you're early on in a Fire Emblem game, you're gonna deal with a lot of Brigands first. And the old Brigand boss is like your Chapter 1 antagonist. It's a nice way to start things in a simple, effective manner. I'm not going to disparage a Fire Emblem game when they don't have Brigands. But I don't think it ever really makes the game worse. Just having some simple bandits to start things out with. Especially if you make a good plan at like Gomez from Fire Emblem 776. Thracia 776. I don't know why I said it like that. Where it's a result of Thracia being a very poor place for crops, leading otherwise decent men into being, brigands. That's how brigands happen usually. Desperation. I don't know. It's a good way to set tone, or just to have a simple bad guy to beat for the first couple chapters. Alright, so the worst trope is totally the adult character that looks like a child trope. Especially in the games that they let you marry characters, like, why do this? It's just gross. I don't think I need to explain why it's gross. You already know why it's gross. The trainee. Probably put him above the human dragons. Just as a quick aside, I just realized in the middle of editing that I forgot about the hub world, which has been a thing since around Fire Emblem Fates, where you could run around, do extra activities, and do more prep between chapters. I do think that, especially in Three Houses and also in Engage, I think they slow down the game a little too much, and I'm not really a fan of them. Although they have been done well, it's one of the best things about Fates, and I do like the bases, the menu-based bases anyway, in the Tellius games. I'm personally kind of done with the concept of an explorable overworld, though, so I'm not really a big fan. And so they go right here. Alright, so rounding out this list, we have the trainee. The little scrub villager, the kid you pick up along the way. Like, yeah, they start weak, they get strong. Oh, man. I didn't forget that one. That one just didn't show up. I'll make an addendum later on. You get a little villager kid, you train them up, they start really weak, they grow to be really strong. A nice inversion, if Trope didn't show up here, I guess I'll edit in post. The opposite of this, the Jagan, the character you get early on, who's the old man that doesn't really have much more room to grow, but is there to help guide new player and the new recruits through the early game in a safe, effective manner. I'd inject that in my veins. I love the idea of the old veteran stepping in to help the youngins. And there it is. Just a few Fire Emblem tropes. Just need, want to have a little experiment. What do you like about Fire Emblem? What do you hate about Fire Emblem? You want to hear me and my friend talk about other stuff? Why don't you stick around and subscribe? And until next time, I'll see you back at the table.